Welcome to Fantasy R&R. I'm your host Ryan, and this is Monday Night Foolsball.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan, Fantasy R&R.
For this episode, I'm going to preview tonight's game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. 8:15 Eastern Time. Minnesota's favored by 3 with the Vegas betting odds. They're sitting at 3-5. Chicago at 5-4. What's interesting about that is a lot of people think it's a smoke show. Chicago's got too high of a record. Minnesota might be able to overtake the rest of the division and then square off with the Packers to see who takes the lead.
If I die, I die.
Not sure how many of you actually roster Kirk Cousins in your league, and if you do have him rostered, it's probably because you're waiting to use him on a week like this week when Patrick Mahomes is on a bye. Kirk Cousins has been Kirk Cousins, on pace for about 3,600 yards, 30 TDs, thrown a lot of picks this year, but he's been steady from a fantasy perspective. Of course, on Monday night, Sunday night, Cousins has a history of struggling in prime time, and on top of that, he's traveling to Chicago in 40-degree weather and 7-mile-an-hour steady winds to play this game. So not sure if he's going to be the best matchup for him. Chicago's defense is pretty good. We're probably going to be looking to the run game a lot from the Vikings in this one.
Big Dick Nick.
Nick Foles has been pretty inept. This is a desperation play for people, I'm sure. Don't expect much. 1,700 yards, 10 TDs, 7 interceptions on the season. I believe he has a couple of fumbles. He's really been struggling. This offense does not look good. I've even heard that they may turn to Trubisky again at some point in the future because at least Trubisky can do something with his legs.
I mean, running backs, Joe Rogan.
Dalvin Cook, clearly going to be a plug and play. Not much to say about him. Been a total stud this year. So David Montgomery, as I was talking about in the injury report, he's going to be out, unfortunately, for this game. Look to Cordero Patterson, Ryan Nails in the backfield if you're desperate. Tariq Cohen obviously out with that ACL as well. So if you need a quick plug and play and you're in a league where you can pick somebody up real quick, maybe you go with Cordero Patterson, I think. Mostly because most leagues are going to give you points for kickoff and punt returns, which he handles a lot of that stuff.
Throw the goddamn ball.
Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, going to be pretty decent plays. Again, it's the defense of the Bears you got to be worried about and the inconsistency of Cousins. But Jefferson's been getting plenty of targets, receptions, yards. Not a whole ton of TDs. He's been big TDs, but he's on pace for 6. I think he's doing pretty good. Adam Thielen has had a couple great games, a couple down games. So if you got them in there, it's probably at a flex or a tempered position. Don't expect a whole lot, but one of them usually has a good game.
But what about the other team?
Allen Robinson is going to be your big guy on the Bears. He's on pace for about 110 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 6 TDs this year. Guy's unstoppable. Hate that the Jaguars got rid of him. Anthony Miller could be a good flex play, and I really like this Darnell Mooney kid. They're taking deep shots at him. Foles can throw a long ball, but again, it's the inconsistency of Foles that's going to limit your wide receivers. Obviously, you plug and play Allen Robinson. The Vikings defense isn't great against the pass, so it's possible maybe a guy like Darnell Mooney in a flex position gets you a big play.
Who cares?
And the last thing to note was obviously, like I said in the injury report, Irv Smith Jr. is going to be out. This may just result in maybe a few more targets to Kyle Rudolph. Tight ends have been tight this year, no pun intended, and if you've got him in as a desperation play for your tight end, you could hope to see a couple more targets. If you don't have him in, you're wondering whether to flex him or switch him out for maybe, the guys on the Bears side of the ball like Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet. I still go with Jimmy Graham, but Rudolph could see a few extra targets in this game.
Let's switch it up.
One thing I thought would be fun to talk about is the NFL MVP versus fantasy MVP conversation. When we talk about an NFL MVP, I always look at it as exactly what it says, most valuable player. If you took this guy and moved him around the league onto different teams, what would he be doing for them? Would he bring them down? Would he rise them up? Would it be a good fit in no matter what situation or scheme he's in? So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the guys I think could be in the running for NFL MVP right now.
Russell Wilson.
I'm actually going to start at the bottom of my very brief 7-man list here. These are the guys I think are in the running. So when I say that he's at the bottom, what I really mean is he's in the conversation, but we have to see a shift for the second half of the year. Russell Wilson is starting to turn over the ball a little bit too much, and he's been the reason for some of his team's losses, not necessarily the defense. When you're turning the ball over that many times, the other team gets a short field. You can't be blaming your defense for having to come back out onto the field when they're already exhausted and then defend maybe a 30 to 20 yard territory. So Wilson, who started off hot, has tons of touchdowns. He is carrying his offense. He is carrying the team a lot. I get it. But because of the way he's turning over the ball and making those mistakes, you can't have him at the forefront of the MVP conversation anymore.
Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray has been outstanding. Again, it's the problem with the turnovers. Murray is throwing a lot of picks, almost one per game at this point, and he's fumbled the ball a few times, and those turnovers have put the other team in a position where they're taking an advantage of the game and turning the turnover into points. Murray, in that sense, has lost a couple games for his team. When you look at the guy overall, I think he's a fantastic player. He's got tons of TDs on the season, 17 in the air, 10 on the ground. He's on pace for about 4,500 yards passing and 1,200 yards rushing. He's an absolute stud. Yes, he's looking great for the fantasy MVP status. With the MVP for NFL, I don't know if he gets there unless things turn around for the rest of the season and he stops turning over the ball.
Dalvin Cook.
Dalvin Cook does make number 5 on my list out of 7. I think he truly makes his team better. The reason he's low is because running backs usually don't get taken a lot as the MVP pick. I thought last year McCaffrey should have taken MVP for the league. This is one of those situations where I think a running back is starting to make a name for himself just with the pure production that they carry for their team, and then the fact that he's always bailing out his quarterback. So put Cook in that conversation as well.
Alvin Kamara.
Number 4, Alvin Kamara. How could I not have Kamara in here if I'm putting Cook into the conversation as well? Kamara is driving the Saints offense. Breeze is struggling a little bit. I'll get to that a little bit later why. I've got an interesting graph to tell you about. But Kamara is the guy who's turning all of these dump-off passes and runs into big plays, and he's scoring a lot of points for their offense. You have to have Kamara in the conversation right now. He's just as important as any quarterback we could be talking about for MVP.
Tom Brady.
Number 3, here's my controversial pick. Tom Brady? I mean, when we see what happened to the Patriots compared to when Tom Brady left that team and what was going on with the Bucs last year, and now he's on the Bucs, what's happening for the Buccaneers and to the Patriots now? I mean, how could you not have him in this conversation? Sure, I get it. There was a really bad game against the Saints, and I'm sitting here talking about Murray and Wilson's turnovers. Brady played terrible in that game. He is the reason they lost clearly. I mean, he missed Antonio Brown on a couple open bombs, but he's also playing lights out for the rest of the year, and he's making the Buccaneers relevant. This is somebody who I think after 6 Super Bowl rings deserves to be in this conversation again because he's clearly making his new team better.
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, 2,500 yards, 26 TDs, 3 interceptions. He only had one bad game, just like Brady, and it was against Brady and the Buccaneers. Rodgers threw for 160 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but every other game, he's had a QBR over 100. I think Rodgers needs to be in the conversation. He's leading the Packers to their greatness. I think he has more weapons than they like to let on. I mean, they're not in a terrible situation over there, but Rodgers does have that it factor that some of the other QBs don't, where he's just willing to take it down to the wire and put up unbelievable stats. I mean, he's on pace for about 50 TDs. Put Aaron Rodgers in at number 2 for now.
Number 1, Patrick Mahomes.
At number 1, we have Patrick Mahomes. I love this kid, have for a while. I'm glad he got MVP and Super Bowl champion out of the way so early in his career. This season, 2,687 yards passing, 25 TDs through the air, only 1 interception, no fumbles. He's got 171 yards rushing and 2 TDs on the ground. He's been absolutely lights out. He's made other guys on his team better. Travis Kelce is the number 1 tight end again. Tyreek Hill's the number 1 wide receiver again. They're putting up all these stats. He does have more weapons, but this is one of the things I want to talk about. When we talk about the NFL MVP versus a fantasy MVP, let's look at something. There's this graph that's interesting here, and as you can see, it's saying Daniel Jones faced the hardest defense in the league. So we'll take that as your baseline here and kind of go down the list of some of these quarterback names and look at Patrick Mahomes. He's pretty much in the middle of the pack. Tom Brady just a little bit above him. underneath Mahomes are some of the guys we already talked about, like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray. Rodgers, Murray, and Wilson have easier schedules this year by far, and they're going to be prone to throwing the ball a lot more because of the defense that they've got on their team. Mahomes, he's in the middle of the pack playing harder defenses, and he's absolutely playing lights out. And you have to give Tom Brady that same respect. He's playing tough teams. It's not just a walk in the park. This isn't Tom Brady against the Bills and the Jets anymore. These are hard teams they're playing. I mean, look at Lamar Jackson. He's playing one of the hardest schedules in the league for any relevant quarterback. Drew Brees too. Now we know Brees, maybe he looks like he's fading. Maybe it's because of the defenses he's playing. He checks down to Kamara a lot, and Kamara makes big plays. So it's really hard to make anything of Drew Brees' situation as a QB MVP. But maybe even throw Brees on the very end of my list at like a number 8 or something like that. Lamar Jackson, he's struggling from his MVP campaign last year, and this could be a reason why. Lamar Jackson still has a lot of talent, but what I'm trying to say here is Mahomes and Brady, me having them so high on the list is really, this is indicative of just how good they're playing, because they've got a tough defense to go up against each and every week. So give some props to guys like Mahomes. He is here to stay. He's not a fad. You're watching greatness. Just sit back and enjoy it.
But what does this all mean?
Fantasy MVP. I think at this point it's got to go to Alvin Kamara. And the reason I say that is because QBs are kind of a dime a dozen. You got 32 starters in the NFL, and in most leagues you're going to see about 20 to 24 quarterbacks at most rostered, meaning you still got options to choose from of quarterbacks that go out there and play every day. You're never starting backup QBs. So let's keep them out of the conversation and talk about fantasy MVP, which I believe at this point is Alvin Kamara, just from the amount of points he continues to put up, even with the bye week involved. He is dominating the conversation. Dalvin Cook is not far behind. Dalvin Cook is probably on pace for the Damian Tomlinson-like season, where he just won't stop scoring rushing TDs, but he's already had a bye week. And what makes Dalvin Cook really interesting is he missed a game due to injury, so he could technically have more points than Alvin Kamara right now, but just doesn't. But that might actually show you the difference between Kamara and Cook from a fantasy MVP conversation, because Kamara's not getting hurt, Dalvin Cook is. Now, I also think that Dalvin Cook's a great pass catcher, but Kamara is putting up numbers that wide receivers would be jealous of. So we're looking at Kyler Murray is a fantastic pick, could go in the first round of any fantasy draft. He is definitely MVP caliber in the NFL and MVP caliber in fantasy. When it comes to coveting those position players, you're looking at Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara running away with it. The closest guys behind them are Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams. Two guys that you're like, yeah, I'd love to have them on my fantasy team. But when you go to draft next year, are you going to take Devontae Adams or Derrick Henry over Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara? I don't think so. So when McCaffrey comes back, we'll see how that all plays out. Right now, as it stands, 2020 Fantasy MVP, it's going to Alvin Kamara. Let's see what happens the rest of the year.
Thanks for listening.
All right, with that concludes our Monday Night Foolswell episode. Hope you enjoyed. Join me next time with Rob for our regularly scheduled episode of the weekly preview. This is Fantasy R&R.
That's what fantasy with Rob and Ryan. Fantasy R&R.